I was gonna be real fancy and say this in German since since you're German, but then I forgot what the word was. Never mind. Grüß dich, Timo.
Danke dir.
Yay, I remembered. Okay. Hi, my name is Susie Box, for those who don't know me and are watching the channel for the first time. What I do basically every other year is interview the poets and the writers who are premiering in the features of the short of it, as well as in the compilation, which I produce every couple of years. We are now working on volume 2, and today I am interviewing Timo Schmitz. He is a obviously I'm not a language fanatic, but he is, as evidenced by the fact that he speaks Luxembourgish, German, English, French, Chinese, Russian, and Yiddish on a higher level. He also has a basic knowledge in Korean. He's a philosopher, journalist, poet, and a book author from Germany, where he lives and studies. He authored poetry books in German, English, and French. His poetry has always also been featured in Luna's Poetry Bar, as well as in I Write Her. This is Timo's first feature with us, and I just want to welcome him to the I Write the short of it. Again, I'm not the language fanatic.
No problem.
This is his first feature on the short of it, and I'd like to welcome him. He also most recently received a PhD student, is working on as a PhD student in philosophy. So congratulations on that. Can you tell me a little bit more about your thesis?
Thank
there?
you. Yeah, I am writing on ancient Greek philosophy, and I'm especially focusing on Plato.
Nice. I've read a little bit of Plato, and I thought he was fascinating to read. And what I came away with from reading some of his material, I haven't gone into, like full depth immersion on him, but just some of the stuff that I read, what interested me was reading all the old poets, philosophers, is just seeing how the similarities there were between our world. Forget the technology. Obviously, technology is a lot different than it was back then, but the human thoughts and the emotions and the feelings and the expressions, we have not really evolved that much in terms of how we approach life, it feels like. We do still think the same things. We all are still asking the same questions, and we're still not getting all the right answers. That's what I came away with.
I know. It's interesting if you know where the word technology actually comes from, because that's quite an interesting thing. It's the Greek word techne, and techne actually means an art. And it's not an art like you go into a museum. It's not like you look at art, but it's like a craft, a handicraft. It's a kind of art. It's an art to know mathematics. It's an art to be able to speak. So you have rhetorics and so on and so on. So techne itself is the word for art. So yes, it's very, very interesting.
So basically, all the technology, all the new technology that continues to be developed is basically, we're all artists. They're all artists because they're creating something new. Okay.
Yes, it's a systematic creation. You can do something, then you should do something. But if you know what you're doing, then you're doing art, techne. And now we take Aristotle. If you do it systemized, then you are doing science. Then you are doing it on the level, you have the knowledge about how to do the art right. You have the episteme.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting. I never knew the root of the word technical, so that's interesting. I learned something new. Thank you for sharing that with us and
You're welcome.
schooling me a little bit. That is one of the things I find very interesting about your blog too. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put reference your link to your blog underneath the YouTube video so people can go and check you out too. But I find that very interesting that you are so you are really immersed in a lot of different subjects, interesting subjects. What is that about you that you really enjoy just digging into so much different subject matter?
Well, I like to see things globally. I think that's important. It's not like that I just want to focus on one thing. I think that too often we just take a look at things not diverse enough. Like we think we know something, but in fact, if you take a look at the left and the right, you will see that there's much more to discover. And I think this is a very important part. So that I'm always fascinated about looking beyond the common things.
Just your own backyard. Yeah.
Yes.
I agree with you 100%. I don't know if you know, but I live in Kansas, which is smack dab in the middle of the United States. And I find, I don't know the recent statistic, but I do know it was way more than 50% of the people in this state have not left the state. They have not traveled. They have no interest basically in seeing what the rest of the world is doing, which I don't understand that at all. I completely agree with you, because I think it's really important that we do understand what happens culturally, technologically, everything. Understand what is going on in your world, because then you make it better for yourself as well as others. Just by knowing it, you know.
Actually, you mentioned a nice word, culture.
Sure.
It's again, we go into antiquity. You know, the origin of the word is you have in Latin, you have natura for nature. It is just that thing which is given. And then you have cultura, which is culture. And this is everything which man adds to nature. Actually, the idea is already inherited by the Greek people, but you know, this opposition, natura, cultura, that's I guess it sounds more Roman to me, but you already have it there, and it's even more interesting if you have Democritus in mind, because nature in Greek is physis, and he goes so far that the way you're socialized, educated, and so on, it becomes so normal to you that you maybe don't even question it anymore, that it becomes a second nature, a deutere physe. So it's like there's nature, and then there's the layer over nature, which is quite interesting, because we know this until today it can take like constructivist skepticist views here. It's like that you can say that every worldview is just plainly subjective. This is very interesting. Of course, the ancient Greek people were interested in how to make things objective. How can we find objective truth? Which is very interesting. But we can also say today, in postmodern time, we have mostly based paradigms on receiving the world or acknowledging that the world is subjective, because which makes many modern paradigms, which we thought 50 years ago to be common, they are kind of getting problematic, because like 50 years ago, it was mostly common in Western countries, like that the Western values have to be transported everywhere else. You know, like everybody should become like us. Today, in postmodern times, we rather take the stance that we try to understand the others, that we see that they had another socialization, that they have another background, so that they simply have another view than we have, because there is no objective view, but each of us had different education.
And I would agree with you that there are some people who are trying to do that. But when you live in a country that is, in my opinion, incredibly divided right now, you've got the opposite going on as well. And we are constantly fighting each other over this. I wonder what the outcome is going to be in the next 10 years for this country, the way it's going right now. We have so much infighting, and it's sad to see, but I mean, I don't know. It's an evolution. It's a process. It's something you're constantly going to come up against. There's going to be divisiveness, and there's going to be disagreements, and it comes to a head first, and then, you know, resolutions tend to follow. So we'll see how it goes, but
it's very interesting, because it exactly shows the subjective worldview. It becomes that today, in times where we have social media, people tend to live more in their own bubbles. They like to to connect and to consume with people who think in the same way, who are like-minded, and which means that they do not see the others anymore because they are caught in their own bubble. And even if we try to look at left and right, we always we all have our views. But if you are like becoming mainly interactive in your bubble, you will only see like your truths and what you're doing. And I think that this is a problem. It's not a new problem. It's just a problem of disconnection. And we already find this problem already, like maybe you know Hannah Arendt, and she had this nice word Weltvergessenheit. The most problem, really, and I think it's really problematic when people, it's literally means forgetting the world or world forgetting. It becomes, if you disconnect with the world, if different social milieus are not able to recognize other positions or dissent anymore, then you disconnect from them. You just try to think in a friend-enemy scheme, and then it's like you disconnect from the different opinions which are possible, which actually leads to such actually forgetting the whole world.
Right. Well, I think part of the problem too is just the isolation that each country is creating for itself. It kind of cuts itself off from the rest of the world by creating borders. And I mean, if we were a world, if we really were objective and we thought about how the things that we do affect the world, we would be one people of the world, wouldn't we?
Interesting, because today we are more connected to each other globally than we ever were due to technology. But
we're not connected.
Right, but we are more divided than ever before. Right. And this is the interesting thing. I cannot give a clear answer like in 5 minutes to that.
I know.
You could fill whole seminars with this question, because it's interesting when people knew less of the world, were less connected to each other, living more separated. They seemingly were more connected than today, where we are at least globally connected through internet and still connect less. It's funny.
It's a total conundrum, but it's the world that we live in, so we do the best that we can. And one of the things I find fascinating, at least about your blog, is the fact that you really try to connect with all the different things that are going on in your world. I feel like I would have a brain overload with some of the topics that you try to conquer or, discuss or immerse yourself in. I love your love of learning for sure, but my goodness, they're on a caliber and a level that I can't even compete with. And I'm an avid learner myself. So kudos to you. I just wanted to tell you that too.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. So tell me what you do, like how do you go from philosophy and understanding the past and epistemology and etymology and all that of words and understanding all that thing? How does it bring you to poetry?
Well, poetry was actually the first genre which I wrote. Before I wrote any other works, I started with poetry let's say exactly 10 years ago. So I'm doing this since a decade now. I started writing in 2012 and published my first poetry collection in 2013. So exactly 1 decade. Yes, and this was where I started. I did not write other genres before. So my writing.
Your poetry took you to learning all the other things.
Yes, but my writing. When my writing started, or what I tried to achieve, it all started with poetry, actually.
Well, I see too that you've done some work for the Jewish Independent Forward magazine.
I wrote some freelance articles for the Jewish Forward, or as it's known in Yiddish, Vorwärts. Which is I wrote there. in German as well. And yes, I contributed there about Judaism in Germany, because Judaism is an important part in my life, actually. Religion in general is an important part of my life. Actually, like Judaism, Buddhism, Taoism, and also Christianity. These are all topics that are very, very important to me. And so, of course, I wanted to contribute a bit to let American readers know about what's going on in Germany and how it affects Jewish life.
Well, yeah, I know. The one piece I just saw was the one about the anti-Semitism that's going on. It was I think you wrote this a couple of years ago or 3 years ago. Why Germany, or why the anti-Semitism? Geez, speak today, Susie. My goodness. Bah. Why is anti-Semitism in Germany on the rise? I am fascinated by that myself. Coming from Germany, I mean, I was born there. I lived there about 8 years. And I know that we, during the war, my mom grew up in the war. My dad, they met each other during the war. So to see my father fight against it, and he was with my mom, and her family was basically in it and with it. They had their mandatory four Nazi children, and how did those two get together is always my question. But I know what they went through, and I know what they had to overcome to become a better country. And then to see this come back, what is going on? I mean, it makes no sense to me. Maybe you can help explain that.
Yes, I can understand, but that's more a question we have to see on a larger scale, because I think personally that these political streams which are behind there are growing generally in Europe, and also they are like well connected both to Eastern Europe and to the US. So it's so I think it has to do a lot with the political milieu, with like the election of Donald Trump, with what is going on generally in Europe, like the problem that many people like feel disappointed by politics and try for easy explanation in combination with the corona pandemic, in combination with the warfare on social media and disinformation, which triggers democracy again, and on which I wrote an interesting book on digital democracy in German language. So because it's a really important point that democracy becomes globalized, not globalized but digitalized, let's say it like this, because many things, like we have a system, we are living in the 21st century, but of course the system is always on on the basis when it was founded. This goes both to Germany and to the US. You find a large like disadvantage maybe in the US, that it's like hundreds of years old, the constitution. So the question is it still fit for today? And we have the same problem, of course, that in Germany, that there's like a lot of bureaucratic stuff is still done in analogous ways, where where the enemies of democracy are already in the internet, which means that fighting the enemies of a liberal society with analogous means, with means that are still in an outside of the internet, while they already know how to use the internet, how to conquer it. This is a huge problem. So also the social media has an important impact. And of course, algorithms have an important impact. So it all comes together. But we have to be aware, and it's a sad truth, but we have to be aware that sadly, people who hate other people always existed. It never vanished. Then maybe an important difference was that many people in the past, maybe in Germany, did not dare out to speak their hate. But now that there are mass movements,
the floodgates are open.
Yeah, the gates are open. They become part of the parliament, and when they are in the parliament, they even dare get more roughly. When they get there more roughly in their speeches, then other people see like, oh, politicians are speaking this way, I can speak this way too. And all this, it's a very it's a very problematic mixture.
Yeah. And we see it here too. I mean, when I look at the bigotry that's on the rise, when I see the hate and the display of the power that is trying to undermine the LGBTQ community, that is trying to undermine women. I mean, the whole Roe v. Wade thing too is ridiculous, how it got thrown out, and now we've got half our country that is not allowing our women to have rights over their own bodies. It's like, I am 60 years old. I did not expect to see this happening, especially when things started changing in the 70s. It just blows
Well,
my.
you have to know that things always change, and I don't, because I told about the disadvantages of the US. I don't want to diminish the advantages, of
Mhm.
course, but you have to see that sometimes younger countries better have a better start today, like because those who collapsed from the Soviet Union, they had to build their ground completely on a new
Right.
ground, and they already could work like the constitutional ideas on a
Mhm.
technological standard like of
Right.
the beginning of the 90s. But it's hard to change a whole constitutional system or put a whole constitutional system into a new time or a new era in times of peace. Of course, peace is important. We need peace, but it is always difficult to make major changes when times where people are not in conflict.
No,
But
that's
of
true.
course,
Because yeah, I've taught my son and I had this very conversation too. It is the only time things actually change is when there's extreme thoughts, extreme actions coming to the forefront. And then things have to get really bad, and then they get a little bit better, and then they get a little bad, and then they get maybe better. I mean, it's cyclical almost, to see
yes,
how things advance.
of course, and this is also, I don't want to take any stance on U.S. politics here. I'm on neither side. I know
That's okay.
how
I'll do that.
difficult. No. It's I don't want to make here like a stance, but I see in the conflict or on the division of the two
Mhm.
camps. That's from somebody who lives outside. Let's say like
Yes.
this, who looks
Mhm.
on it from the outside. It shows the different values which
Mhm.
are lived in the US. And I think that generally spoken is not a problem because, of course, it is your right to have like
Mhm.
traditionalist views or to
Mhm.
think like, of course, as long as they are not xenophobic or something, but like to say
Right.
like we want to have a country like that is based on the values of Christianity, for instance, because this
Mhm.
is where the people came from the Puritans, from the Pilgrims, from all this. This is like the DNA.
Mhm.
This is completely fine. And on the other hand, of course, there is the camp which says, okay, this is this is all past, or this is all, it was part of the past. Now we have to look forward. And you always have this in every country, the problem between conservatism, how far do you want to conserve your values, and how far do you want to progress your values. The only problem in the US is just that it's more divided. There's no
Mhm.
middle, no in between. You don't find this extreme in Europe. Actually, our conservatives in many European countries are not really that conservative compared to the US.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
also understand that there are conservative people in the US which are concerned that if the values of their country break away, that this is also like a loss of their own identity. And I think
Mhm.
identity is always something with which you can trigger people. If you say like, this is taking your freedom away, this is taking what your forefathers fought for away, this is what you always lived for away, of course this triggers people emotionally. And I think this is a large problem because in the US people are very emotionally about whether it should be a conservative
Mhm.
traditionalist country or whether it should be a liberal country.
Right. And I think you're right. I think there's more of a reactionary state from those types of people that put their values or at their core, this is what they think life should be. The problem is though, if you've got a country that is based on freedom for all, then you have to be able to accept the fact that some people are not going to think like you. Some people are not going to live like you. some people just want to be left alone. Some people just want to be completely involved and immersed in their country and patriotic. And I mean, all of those values are supposed to be upheld, all of them. Obviously not the things that are hurting other people. You know, we don't want
Yes.
murderers running around. And
but here I have to say that what you say reactionary, it is not generally a anti. Of course, it is on a stance between liberalism as a political philosophy. Yes, it's against this, but it's not and against freedom. You can also live a free life in a conservative society. The problem is, and this is the thing, that if you become like too liberal, it's like you enforce others to accept your liberal ideas, which means that, I mean, it's good if your neighbor wants to go to church every Sunday and you don't want to, and each one can decide on their own. The one who goes can go, the one who does not go, then it's fine. This is liberty for all, values for all.
Right.
But if you start like to say like everybody who does this or who supports that is a anti-freedom or anti-liberal, then even as a liberal, you enforce your values on others, taking their freedom to dissent away, which is also a problem.
Right. I agree with you 100%. That's what you said earlier too. There's too much extremism. I don't care where it is, in the United States, Germany, Europe, Russia, whatever. There has to be more moderates in this country to be able to balance out thought processes, because basically that's what it boils down to. Being a liberal or conservative is just thinking a little bit differently. But what I have noticed, though, I feel like the extremists on both ends of the spectrum feel like that they are being annihilated almost. And this is why there's so much of the extreme chatter going on and trying to convert others to their way of thinking. This is what I'm hearing, at least, and here in this country. And it's sad, because I think that being able to be open-minded and listening and learning and understanding is such a better way, so much more a better way than just trying to control or dominate others with their viewpoint, because it doesn't. And what's interesting, though, is I've had people say to me that were very conservative or ultra conservative say that I'm the one who's just trying to dictate. And I'm like, no, I'm only dictating for me, for my life, for how I want to have a standard of living or a way of life. I'm not expecting you to live any kind of way. All I want from you is to just not step on my life. That's it. So it's crazy sometimes. The politics here are just definitely interesting for sure. I really enjoy every election cycle, not just the every 4 years. It's every year there's something going on, some hot button issue that needs to be fought out. It's ridiculous.
What we need more is participation. This is something I write in my book. This is why I'm an extreme friend of digital democracy. We need more participation, because the problem of representation is that other people decide in your name, and the problem is that it's kind of in the times where we are so connected, at least through internet, through the means, technologically connected, we could use this to make people participate, because if you have to do decisions yourself, you will probably think differently than when you just go like on the street and demand others to do something, because then it's not your responsibility anymore.
But this is why I think technology has been a bonus to the whole process, even though it feels like it's a lot more wicked. I feel like because of social media and because of all the different technological advances that we've made, and especially my kids, even, I mean, I look at them, they're approaching, one's 30 and the other one's approaching 30. They are so in tune with politics. And you even saw it in all the elections the last few years, the cycles. It's the young people that are actually participating because they see what's going on. And I think they're more involved and more engaged in many ways than even people who, like the middle of the road people. They're like, they don't kind of care about it, which I don't understand that. This is your world. This is your life that you're talking about. You should be involved. But before we go any further with this fascinating conversation, it has been thrilling to talk to somebody who is of that kind of a political and philosophical mind. So thank you for the conversation. I want to say that first of all. But we are running out of time, and I do still want to get to your poetry. So would you please read the piece that you've selected?
Sure. I'm going to read the piece which is actually being in your anthology, Becoming and Deceasing, which is also quite philosophical. I'm going to read it. Rain is dropping on my head, weather happy, weather sad. Rain is light and has no mood, life-giving on the earth glued, but coming together destructive, dropping all life abductive.
I would like you to explain it, because this one has a bit of mystery to it, but I will tell you then what I think of, or what it brought out in me. But go ahead, explain what prompted this to come to your mind.
Well, actually, we have here an interesting dualism, that one of the cycle, like of becoming and decreasing and deceasing, and of course you have here a very, very interesting word like rain, which is of course consisting of water, and you know that water is both life-giving. On the one hand, we need water to survive, and on the other hand, we have seen this in the last years with all the floods appearing, how destructive all this can be, how this circle can be. And of course, this is like, actually it's okay, I can say this, it's a bit influenced, of course, by Taoism, by this circle of becoming, of this yin and yang, these two forces, that one cannot be without the other, the life-giving cannot be without the dead. But yes, but I also want to make people think deeper inside it. And here is where I actually have to stop explaining, because it's an important thing for me, and it always has been, is the literary intimacy. It's not the personal intimacy, nothing like a relationship or bodily intimacy, but it's the intimacy between the reader of the poem and the poem, because everyone, like you already said, it's mysterious, has an own connection to it. And I think that many of my readers, despite what I said now, will see more in it. And this is, and everybody for one's own. We have talked about subjectiveness. So everybody who will listen to it or who will read it will build an own, if he's really interested in reflecting about it and not just consuming it, will build up an own intimacy with this poem, will look at the words, will reflect on these words, and think about like what kind of impact it has to his life or her life. And how this all goes together. So yes, I don't want to give all the mystery away.
That's fine.
But you see, it has a life circle inside.
It does. And one of the other things too that it brought up for me was just like when you mentioned yin and yang, I was like, this is so perfect, because I'm a person who thrives on trying to achieve balance and trying to understand both sides. And when I read this one, what I came away with was I felt the activism in it, because I realized it was approaching a subject about how we as humans are being destructive. At least that's what I took away from it, because we are impacting the natural cycles. So there is extremism in life just because things happen, variables, wind direction, whatever, everything impacts everything else. We're all connected. But we as humans are making things worse. And this is what I saw in here, and how we should probably take a step back and understand that we have to be a part of the solution too. At least that's what I got out of it.
Actually, very interesting is like what you said, balance, or like the middle way back from the extremes. It is what Aristotle called virtue. That's what we know as virtue, is actually going back away from extremes and trying to approach a middle way which is acceptable for all of us. This is what the Greek arete actually means. To live a virtuous life means to live a life in balance, in accordance, and not a life in a kind of extremism which actually spoils your life.
Right. Oh, so what you're telling me is you're calling me virtuous. Awesome. I like that. I'm glad I can add that to my resume. But anyway, thank you so much, Timo, for spending time with me. I really, truly enjoyed our conversation. It was very mentally stimulating. So thank you for that. And I
Thanks
also,
for the invitation.
hey, and thanks for coming to submit. Thanks for being a part of it, being a part of our family now, and also to see your work debuted in our next volume, volume 2, called Reflections and Revelations, is perfect. It's a wonderful, 2 wonderful pieces that we're going to add to it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And it was great talking to you, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.